All right, everyone. Welcome to today's session. I'm Adam Berzin from MS Dynamics World. I'd like to thank you all for joining us. Today's session, Beyond the Sales Funnel with Power BI, will be presented by Ulrich Carlson, who's a Senior Solution Architect and Readiness Expert at Elevate Solutions, and he's also the CRM chart guy. Ulrich, we're very happy to have you here with us today, so thank you very much. For all the attendees. If you have any questions, you can submit them during the session through the Q&A box on the right side of your screen, and Ulrich will try to get to all of them during the event or by the end of the event. So Ulrich, pass it right back over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and please take advantage of the opportunity to ask questions. That's one of the benefits of attending the live event instead of just catching the webcast later. So if you do have questions, definitely don't hesitate to ask. As mentioned, my name is Ulrich Carlson. I do work for Elevate Solutions. I've been working with Dynamics CRM, or now Dynamics 365, for over 10 years now, but been working with various CRM systems actually since the year 2000. So I'm actually currently based in San Francisco, so I'm here in the Bay Area. But if any of you are thinking like, oh, that guy's accent doesn't sound particularly San Franciscan or Californian even, that's because I'm originally from Copenhagen. So I actually moved to the States here about 10 years ago or so. And one thing I like to do, particularly here with CRM and working with opportunities in sales, is also blogging about charts, KPIs, Power BI, specifically for Dynamics CRM or Dynamics 365 customer engagement, and see how we can use all these tools that we have available, specifically for the CRM platform usually, how we can use that to gain some additional insights or knowledge about what's going on in our organization compared to what all the standard charts and standard options usually gives us. So my email's on there, and definitely feel free to follow me on Twitter as well, CRM Chat Guy, and of course I put the link up there to my personal blog, crmchatguy.wordpress.com. So that's where I do most of my blogging, both there and on the Elevate Solutions blog. As mentioned, I do work for Elevate Solutions, so I just want to quickly mention where's the work and what we do. We are a Microsoft partner. It was founded by Gus Gonzalez, who's a 6-time Microsoft MVP. So I'm not the only one, on the contrary, who contributes to the community. The CEO of the company, Gus Gonzalez, has definitely contributed to the community for a long, long time. Working as a readiness expert and a trainer for a long time with Dynamics CRM and Dynamics 365. One thing that we do focus on a lot is customer-owned solutions. So we don't necessarily deliver solutions. We help you build and implement the solution. So when you are ready for go live, we want to make sure that you own the solution as well and you're comfortable with it. So we have a huge focus on training and passing on the knowledge rather than just delivering a solution at the end. And one thing we do focus on is also fixed fee pricing. So if that sounds enticing, definitely feel free to give us a call. All right, well, what we're going to be talking about, so this is called Beyond the Sales Funnel. So tell a little about what we want to do with the KPIs or specific dashboards and some of the things that I like to highlight or think about when I'm building dashboards and KPIs, in particular sales funnels. So we want to make sure that the information that we're looking at is relevant. It's very easy to clutter a lot of information onto a dashboard that's not necessarily relevant to the person who'll be using it. I also like to make sure that the dashboards demonstrates accountability and making sure that when you're looking at opportunities or service cases, I have a lot of experience working with case management and services, and it's particularly in those areas, but also for opportunities, you want to make sure that you can always see who is responsible, who's accountable for a given task or an opportunity or a service case, for example. And you want to make sure that you also get additional insights from your data. It's not just, yeah, that's nice to know. You want to make sure that you can actually use it. And finally, of course, you also want to make sure that it's an accurate reflection of the reality, because you're working with data, we're working with statistics. It's easy to skew statistics or focus on the wrong statistics. That necessarily doesn't enhance your business process. So you want to make sure that the data that you're looking at also helps you give a view of the reality of the situation, as opposed to just giving you some KPIs, which doesn't necessarily dig into what it is that you need to know. So as I mentioned, since this is called Beyond the Sales Funnel, we'll have a look at the sales funnels and see what are some of the issues I think we have with the traditional sales funnel. And if anyone recognizes the funnel chart I have here on the screen on this slide, that's the standard Dynamics CRM Dynamics 365 funnel chart, and everything that comes with it. And we can see here it's the standard stages. The first stage is qualify, the second one is develop, the third one is propose, and finally we close the opportunity. So all the opportunities will basically come in where we qualify them, we develop the opportunity in working with the customer, finally we can make an actual proposal, and then we negotiate and close the opportunity at the end. Now what's interesting about this is that the size of the section actually doesn't match the actual value. So if you look a little bit closer on this chart here, you can see that all of these different triangles actually, or squares, actually have the same value of $25,000. But they vary vastly in size, make it look like the qualify stage is actually much, much bigger than the close stage. And then the whole funnel analogy isn't necessarily correct. I'll talk about that one a little bit later. But because of the sizes, you can't really easily compare the different sections just by eyeballing them. I had a quick look at this. I would say, yeah, we have a lot in qualify, and then we have less and less as we go along. We actually have the exact same amount. So actually, just if we look at how that chart is structured, is that if we take that little fourth close stage and take that little area of the chart and just impose it onto the qualify stage, we're going to see that that surface area fits 5 times within the qualify stage, even though they represent the exact same amount of value. So it can give you some misleading information if you're just looking at this chart, but actually without looking at the values of the individual figures too. Now, it's also just a snapshot in time. It actually doesn't show you how your opportunities progresses. It's an information about your opportunities and where they are right now. If we moved an opportunity from stage 2 to stage 3 right now, then the values would basically just change on them. We wouldn't actually be able to see the flow of information that's going on. So, and as I'm talking about these, and we're looking at the different values and how the qualified stage is proportionally large compared to the closed stage. It's basically because the chart is basically designed like Mercator's projection is too. And what's interesting about the sales funnel chart, the standard sales funnel chart, as well as Mercator's projection, which basically completely overemphasizes the size of Greenland compared to the continent of Africa. Everybody knows that it's wrong. Everybody knows that it's not telling you the whole story, but it's just so ingrained in everyone that, you know, that's what we're used to looking at. Even, as I mentioned, I've been working with GM systems since 2000, as I mentioned, and back then that was prior to Dynamics CRM. We had another CRM database in the company I was working at. It was called ACT exclamation mark, and they had the exact same type of funnel chart. So something that's been around for a long time. Some people are simply just used to looking at, they're used to the analogy, they know it's not necessarily correct, but it's just so ingrained that it's kind of become universally accepted despite all of its flaws. The same thing with basically Mercator's projection. And I've actually been working or writing about funnel charts on my blog, amongst others. And I started a little over 2 years ago on just kind of going on, I wouldn't necessarily call it a crusade against the funnel chart, but definitely highlight some of the areas and how you can improve some of its main flaws to get you some better visuals. So hopefully that'll catch on and more people will start improving upon it. On the other hand, I realized in reading up on this that there are also people who's spent their lifetime trying to change Mercator's projection. However, everyone to Bing Maps and Google Maps, etc., are still using that specific type of map. So I'm not getting my hopes up, but hopefully I can give you some ideas and some insights into what you can possibly do better. Now that Power BI comes along, and that's primarily what we're going to be talking about today, is like what can we do with Power BI to make a lot of this data better, because we have more visualization options there, more options of working with the data. And the funnel chart in Power BI is different, and it actually removes that issue with the individual sizes of the different sections, that they don't really match. So the whole thing is that you can't really compare the sections by eyeballing them. They don't correspond accurately to the values. Are kind of taken out by the funnel chart in Power BI in the sense that it's structured more like a centered bar chart, for example. However, the funnel analogy is still incorrect, and it's still just a snapshot in time. And if we look closely here at the labels on this specific chart, it says qualify, propose, develop, close. We can see that the list here is actually sorted alphabetically instead of the stage numbers, so that could also be a potential issue. So what is it we need to have a look at in order to kind of dig a little deeper on what's going on with the sales funnel and how things are moving? Because there's some questions here that needs to be answered which the traditional funnel chart doesn't. So kind of want to look at how many opportunities actually enters the funnel, or how much revenue enters the funnel. So how many new opportunities are you getting, and what's the total value? And where do these different opportunities leave? That's one of the things, like the funnel analogy isn't necessarily correct, because a funnel, you pour something into a funnel, everything comes out of the spout at the end. An opportunity sales funnel, there's a lot of opportunities that leave at different stages. Depending on what they are, and it's worth analyzing exactly what's happening and which stages you lose them at, and how much revenue, how many opportunities actually progress from one stage to the other, and how many you lose from one stage to another. You can analyze the information there. And I'll also give you some details on whether or not the time spent on opportunities to spend on the right opportunities, because the longer time you have an opportunity in your sales funnel, move through all these different stages, the more time that you're spending on it. So if you're losing a lot of opportunities at the very last stage, going through everything, as opposed to losing them earlier in the game, maybe you're not qualifying your opportunities properly. That is definitely something that would be worth investigating. So, but asking question is pretty easy. So let's have a look at what challenges are in working with the data and in Power BI and working with the opportunity data. So the main challenge is that we need to basically represent the same data multiple times within the funnel chart. Because if we have one opportunity and it's in stage 3, that means it has passed through the first 2 stages and still needs to be represented as a value in those 2 stages. The same thing for one opportunity. We basically need to assume that it's gone through all 4 stages, the qualify, develop, propose, and close. And the same thing with an opportunity that was, for example, lost in stage 4, that also moved through stages 1, 2, and 3. So when we look at what's the value, how much actually progressed to the 4th stage, that is all the value of the opportunities that were lost in stage 4 and all the opportunities that were won, for example. And everything that entered the pipeline is basically the value of all of those opportunities that made it further than the first stage. Now, there's also a tricky situation there that you could technically also win an opportunity in stage 2, for example. And that does happen, and usually that is because the salesperson responsible for it did not update or move the sales stage accordingly, because it's very difficult to win an opportunity if you're still just proposing the information or developing the information and gathering information. You do need to send them a proposal. You do need to negotiate and finally close it. So even if an opportunity was closed as one in an earlier stage, technically it would have gone through all of those different stages. And we need to make sure that we look at that in our calculations. The same thing could also happen that, and this happens too, that there are people who have a couple of opportunities on the side that they don't put into the system, so they can work on it and then basically make as soon as they become more likely to win, they'll put them on the table and put them in the system, and then they might already be in stage 2 or 3 or 4 before you get them, and you still have to make the assumption that it actually progressed through all of those stages, because it did, even though it wasn't recorded. So there are some challenges there in making sure that the correct data is represented for each of those stages. So let's look at Power BI and how we can do it. So I'm going to go into a demo soon, go into a demo next. And I'm going to go try and solve this or visualize some of these things using two different approaches. I'm going to use DAX and standard visualizations. So that's basically how we use Power BI out of the box. We would work with some measures and calculated columns, and we'll look at how those works. And then I'm going to try and do the same visualization. I'm going to use M and a custom visualization to look at the flow of data. Now, M is the Power Query language, and it makes a modification on the calculation as the data is being retrieved, as opposed to DAX, which does it on the information that's stored in Power BI. So we can see there's two significantly different approaches, which is like I like to structure it this way. One is not necessarily correct over the other, and as you see the visualizations, you do get some different results, or at least visualize differently. So you can kind of pick and choose on what fits your situation the best. All right, so I'll get set up for a demo. All right, Adam, do we have any questions yet by any chance?
Let's give some people a couple of seconds to collect their thoughts. If you have any questions now about what Ulrich just presented, please feel free to submit them. We can get them answered right now, or if you'd like to wait till the end of the session, that's fine too. But Ulrich, why don't we just give people, 30 seconds or something. It looks like we do actually have some questions coming in. Someone's asking, how are you going to connect to CRM?
So, good question. I wasn't actually planning on showing how I'm connecting to CRM. There's several ways you can do it, and basically the easiest one here is clicking on Get Data. I basically just open up Power BI file open now, but you would do the same thing on a blank file. You can say Get Data, click on More, and search for Dynamics 365 here. And I can select the connection. I'm actually not going to connect just yet. I just want the item here. And I'll put in the web API URL. So in Dynamics 365, you will go to your settings customization area. And there's a item there called Developer Resources. And under that item, you can find the web API URL. You can basically just cut and paste that here. And you can connect to the data, and you can start pulling all the different data. So what I did here, just slightly going off on a tangent, is that I'm actually using Fetch XML to retrieve the data as opposed to the standard connection. The standard connection is when you're getting started with Power BI, I would suggest just using Dynamics 365. It automatically lists all the tables for you, it lists all the fields, and you can basically select what it is that you want to work with. Sometimes it can be a little bit of information overload because sometimes people select too much stuff. It's easier to select less and add later. But that definitely, several ways that you can do that, but the one here I just showed using the Dynamics 365 connector is definitely the easiest one to get started with. All right, any other questions?
It looks like that's it for now, but I think people are probably saving the best stuff for the end.
All right, and I'll be happy to go into more detail on this after the presentation too. So, one thing I want to do here is let's start making a funnel chart and actually see what it would normally look like. So I'll select the funnel chart here, and I'll start selecting some of the data. So I will get the estimated revenues. I have all my opportunity data here, and as soon as I type in the fields that I want, they'll pop up here. I get the estimated value. I can put that in, and I will also want the sales stage here. So you can basically just drag over these fields, and there we get the standard funnel chart that I was talking about. And this is actually a little interesting here. So I actually noticed it says close, develop, propose, qualify. That is completely out of order of what it should be. And that's because it is sorted alphabetically according to this. There's actually a pretty easy fix for this. Notice here in the data, I have both the sales stage, and let me just search for it again. If you're not in the habit of searching for fields, I'd highly recommend it. So sales stage under the opportunity. So I have there the sales stage, which is basically the name of the different sales stages and the sales stage code. This is the option set value that CRM actually stores in there, and the sales stage here is the name on there. So what I want, the sales stages are basic qualify is 0, develop is 1, propose is 2, and close is 3. I basically want to sort it according to the sales stage code. So with this one selected, I can go to modeling and select sort by column. And there we go. It wouldn't really pop down. And I can select the sales stage code. There we go. So now when I use this field, it will be sorted according to the sales stage code. So if I just jump back here, we now see it says qualify, develop, propose, close in the proper order. All right. And we can see the information here. So that's basically broken down by the sales stage. I don't really have the one revenue. So this is the standard funnel chart. It has a lot of the issues there that I was talking about, like it's a snapshot in time. I can't see how much actually entered the data. We can see this percentage down here. 57.1 means that the close stage is now 57.1% of the qualify stage. But our win rate by revenue is actually 22.36%. So we should actually hit something that was closer to this ideally for this item. So what I'll need to do in order to start creating a different type of funnel chart is that I actually need to make the calculations in order to say how much information actually entered the funnel, how much data actually came into stage 2, etc. And one thing I need to do here in our service, I will need to create some new measures. So I need to actually create these calculations here and to include all of the information. I need a lot of calculations to do this. I'll just show an example of how to do one, and then I'll show here in my final version how I actually put it all together. See there? All right, and hopefully the Zoom is working okay. So, for example, one thing I'll need is I'll need all the opportunities that were in phase 1, and that's, for example, are open. And I'll basically just type in the formula bar, and luckily the formula bar here is like Excel. So I'll put in whatever name I want for this measure, and then I can start writing the formulas, and the IntelliSense feature here will basically just help me do it. So I'll use the calculate option, and I can now put in the expression. So the calculate option, for those of you who are used to working with Excel, is basically the sum if on steroids. So you'll put in the expression, say I want to sum the estimated value from opportunities. There you go. Then I can put in the comma, and then I can basically put in my filters. So in this case, I wanted all the opportunities that are in sales stage. Let's see here, I'll go down to the opportunity that are in sales stage code equals 0, because that was the first one, the qualify stage. I can add a comma, and I can basically do another item and say the state, the opportunity state, for example, should be open. All right, I can say that, and I'll actually just zoom out again here so we can see what's going on. So I have my phase 1 open, and I'll actually just remove this funnel chart, and I'll just quickly put in a KPI chart, and we can put in the phase 1 open there. We can see we're actually getting some values for that specific measure. So what I need to do here is basically I want to create all the individual measures, individual pieces that I need in order to piece together how much information I actually entered the pipeline. And I can actually show you the information here. If we look down here on all my measures that I created, I basically have a measure for everything that came into stage 1 that was lost, currently open, 1. The same thing for stage 2, open 1 lost, stage 3, etc., all the way down to how much was 1 in stage 4. So I basically have all my whole pipeline covered. And what I can use those for is I can use these in another measure again here. So we just quickly zoom in again. And we can see here that I can create a measure that says everything that entered the pipeline is basically everything that came in here to stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, and was eventually won. So I have a measure now just called entered pipeline, and that's the value of everything that came into the pipeline based on basically adding up all these different measures here that I just made. And of course, I can continue that and say, you know, I also have what progressed to stage 2, which is basically the same calculation, but here without excluding stage 1, of course. So I can start piecing all of these together. So now I can try and use those in my funnel chart instead of grouping. Create the funnel chart here. And I can start dragging over some of the values. So here we have the entered pipeline. Put that in as a value, and then I can put in. The nice thing here is I can actually add more value. So instead of adding a group by, I can add these different measures. And say progress to stage 3, progress to stage 4, and then finally how much was actually won. The item here. And notice one thing here where we're actually getting a different percentage, 18.6 versus 22.36. It was just the actual win rate revenue. So this calculation right here makes sure that can keep me in track. I can see what's happening here. So notice here I've actually added a little slice up here. So for this item or this type of visualization, I only want to look at completed opportunities. I don't want opportunities that are currently in progress to skew my analytics here, because I want to look at everything that's closed, completed, so we can compare it. So now we actually have a pretty good view of everything that's coming through. How much was actually entered in the pipeline? 417 million, out of which 222 progress onto the next stage. So we can see where we are losing all the different items. And we can also see here we have 22.4. That's the same amount there, rounded. So we get all these details on where we're actually losing information or potentially losing opportunities. Another thing I like to do here on these items is for the data colors, we can show these different items and kind of just change up the different colors here so we can see and make these colors stronger as we go along. Quickly change these up here, and finally we'll do the one. We'll do that in a brown color there. And we can mix these up, and we can of course come in and change the title to something that makes more sense. And we can call this one pipeline progression, for example. And make the text a little bigger. We can change the font color, etc. And then you can spend a lot of time kind of working through all of these. Now, just to add some a little bit additional info to this, because now we can see the information here, how much coming through. We can actually add some loss rates or drop-off rates. So we can see here how much actually progressed, or how much did we actually lose in the first stage. So the drop-off rate for the first stage there, we have the information stage lost versus what was progressed. It's basically just a calculation like how much value did we lose percentage-wise from the first stage. And we can use some of these multi-row cards here and basically put in these drop-off rates so we can see percentage-wise how much are we actually losing per stage. See here, and then of course we can come in and we can make the data labels a little bit bigger, make the categories here slightly bigger, so we can see what we're actually losing per stage. And now that we have all of these details, and we can view the drop-off rate, and we can of course also use the progression rate instead. See, we're losing 46% in the first stage, which is fine. That is a qualified stage. That's actually where we should be losing most of the information, and then it's pretty much around 20%. Now, one of the great benefits of Power BI is the cross-filtering opportunities. So notice down here I've added a little chart with the different uses on. So I can actually click on these individual items, and I can immediately see how the data and KPIs look for that specific user. So here, for example, grabs all his opportunities, takes them all of them through to stage 4, where he loses about 37% of the value at the end. And it's pretty easy to click through and see how people are basically doing and how their KPIs are performing. So let's just see here. So, and this is actually like ideally what one probably should look like, is that you lose a lot during the qualify stage, and then you win most of them afterwards. And we just see my data here. For example, is I lose half in the qualify stage, and then we go through all the data, and of course win the opportunity at the end. Now this is of course all demo data, of course. Included here, I've also added, if you noticed, a view of all the different opportunities that are actually relevant to the data that we're being looked at. So we can see the data here changes. So I can see information from Dynamics, CRM, with the data about the specific opportunity. And this little link here is actually a link to the opportunity directly that I created here in Power BI. So I can basically click on the link, it'll open up a browser and take me to that specific opportunity if there's something in particular I want to investigate. All right, I'll just unfilter this. All right, so I'm going to move on here. So that was one way of doing it with the DAX calculations and using some of the measures, and basically typing in a lot of calculations here, piecing them together, and then using those individual measures here in the value sections of the funnel chart, so I can actually control very specifically what's included in the different stages. And that's also how I can make sure that the input pipeline value, for example, also includes the data that is also present in the other stages, something that's not possible if you use the regular group by option. All right, so, and unless there are any questions here specific to this, I'll go on and talk to how I was using the different approach and use M and custom visualizations instead.
It looks like
and how we can get some different results. Yep,
we've got a couple of questions, yeah, if that's okay. Someone was asking, I think that was on the previous screen that you were showing, for what time period are you filtering? And to add to that, or is this still a snapshot in time?
So I don't have a date filter on here. I could add a date filter. What I'm making sure though is I'm just, in this case, because I only have so much demo data, I'm just using all the completed opportunities. We could have added a date slicer and said, I only want to look at opportunities that were created in the last 18 months or 14 months, depending on how long your sales cycles usually are. So that's a part of the work, is like defining, say, we want to look at the progression, where we're losing the opportunities. And a good point there is if you're making changes in your business processes, you want to look at your old data versus your new data and see if the changes, if you have any differences, and basically compare how your new business processes are performing compared to the old ones. So there'll be some cutoff times there. You can add that into the calculations if needed. But yeah, this example is just all completed opportunities. Yeah, for this example, it was just all completed opportunities.
Perfect. So we do have a couple more questions. So someone is asking if it can also be seamlessly connected to an ERP like Dynamics 365 for operations and Dynamics Nav.
Yes, absolutely. In this case, I'm using Dynamics 365 CRM as a data source, but I might as well here, when I was demoing the get data option earlier, I could also search for the option or basically just use an OData connection to connect to AX or Nav or any Microsoft service, common data service too, etc. Plus hundreds of other connections.
Someone's asking how you put in the opportunity link.
So the opportunity link here, I can actually just quickly show you the formula. It's something that I create manually. And let me just see if I can zoom in a little bit. So the opportunity link there is basically I've put in the specific data. So basically my URL for the data, CRM environment. And then I insert the opportunity ID. So this is the unique ID that Power BI pulls into its data set. I basically put that right in the middle of the link. And then I finish up the URL. And that's basically, you just construct the CRM URL to that specific record using the ID. And if you search for this feature on CRM tip of the day as well, you'll see a step-by-step instructions on how to do it too. I think it's tip 682 or something, but just search for it and I'm sure you'll find it.
Someone's also asking if you wouldn't mind quickly showing how to connect with XML fetch.
Let me make a note of that, and I'll show that at the end.
Okay, perfect. Looks like that's all the questions for now.
All right. So I want to take a different approach here for the other item. We'll look same data, but different way of doing some of the same things, and you can see the results also will look definitely different. One thing I want to do here is use what's called a Sankey chart. This is not something that's a part of Power BI directly. If you want more charts, you can basically come in here, click the little ellipsis, the dot, 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 and say import from store. It'll open up a browser, and you can basically search for hundreds of different additional visuals that you can use within Power BI. And you install them, free to use. Some has a lot of documentation on how to use them, some not so much. The Sankey one is one of those that have a lot of documentation and videos on it that can help you. So in setting this one up, I just want to highlight here, so the Sankey chart is basically designed to show flow of data between different places. So essentially what we're trying to show with the sales funnel too. And there's some requirements here. There's a source field. So for example, you have the value of an opportunity. The source was stage 1, the qualify stage, and the destination would be the develop stage, for example. Then that same opportunity would also need to go from develop to propose, etc. So there's some work with the data and getting all of this set up. And let me actually just show you how the finished version looked like so you can see what we're building towards. So it's basically like this, where we can see everything that came into the pipeline, the qualify stage, how much was actually lost in this stage, how much came in to develop, how much was actually lost here, and compare all of this so we can see the data. And actually, if I just click here, we can see the source. I have a from and a to. Again, it's the same situation. I have one table with the opportunities, but I need the same opportunities to be represented multiple times, depending on how many stages they ran through. Now, there's, of course, a lot of options on how you can create workflows. I create records in CRM that would do that too, but for the sake of the example, I'll try and stick with doing it exclusively in Power BI. And as I mentioned, I wanted to do this not with DAX, but try and use M, so we can talk a little bit about what M is and how to work with it. And basically, M is the Power Query language, the official name of the Power Query language. So what I just did here was I clicked on the edit queries, which opened up the query editor, which is basically where you work your M query. And you don't necessarily, unlike DAX, for example, you don't necessarily need to sit and type a whole lot of formulas. You can also work with the transform a lot of the data up here and detecting data types and modifying the data. So if we look at the opportunity code here, or the opportunity table, I just want to show the advanced editor. The actual M code is what you see right here. You don't necessarily need to come in and type anything in here. It's all being generated for you from using the interface. Now, what I wanted to do specifically with this was I wanted a whole bunch of opportunities stacked together with the destination and the source for each time they changed a stage. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to basically make a table of all my opportunities. That's the one I have here. So I basically just created a new table. I actually just copied my opportunity table. And what I did, I added a from and a to stage at the end and saying this is what entered the pipeline and it went into the qualify stage. Then I basically copied the table again and said these are all the opportunities that went from qualified to develop. And then of course I filtered the information to make sure that come in here. And how I did that was after I copied the opportunity table, I would come up here under add columns and add a conditional column here just by clicking this button. And that will actually give me this view here. So notice here where it says applied steps, I can come back to my previous steps actually just by clicking the little gear icon and make changes to the original dialog. So it's pretty easy to come back and make changes. So I'll say here if the sales stage code is greater than or equal to 1, which means that they passed on from the qualify stage, the output there is qualify, and also if the opportunity is 1, then we're also assuming that it went through the qualify stage. And put qualify in there. So notice here now that this stage is active, I only have the from field. And we can see not all of these values here says qualify. We have some null values because they didn't pass through the qualify stage yet. The same here with the other additional column is defining the to column. So they went to the develop stage. We can see the data here, and then I'm basically just filtering all the rows, and filtering is really easy. You just click on the little item here and say uncheck null. I only want to see the one that actually has value, and that means this is a list of all the opportunities with the value that went from qualified to develop. So I basically went through that process for each of the different stages, so I have a list of all the opportunities with the from and to and the value, so I can piece these together. And all I did was basically using the conditional column button here and then just filtering the item here. It's pretty straightforward. Now finally I had to put all of these together. So, and to do that, I basically had to take all these queries, everything that entered the pipeline, into the develop stage, into the propose stage, into the close stage, into the one stage, the same thing with the lost items. I need to take all of those tables and basically put them on top of each other. And that's actually really easy. There is an item button here called append queries as new. That's the one I used to basically create this Sankey table. So notice here this table has 338 rows, and it has basically all the values from the different tables just put together on top of each other. And when I click that add queries as new, it basically gave me this dialog box here, and I selected 3 or more tables, and I basically just selected all the tables that I wanted included here. And they automatically just put all those tables on top of each other. And once I have that, notice here, I can basically use that Sankey table in my Power BI visuals. So I have it down here. So notice that I don't have any of the other tables in here, all the temporary tables I created. I did a little right click on those and said hide from report view, because there's actually no reason for me to have them in here. I wouldn't be working with them. It's basically just a staging table. And from here I can say the source from and take the to field, the destination there, and start seeing some of this data. And see, it looks very different from what I was just showing, but let's make this a little bit bigger. And then we'll take the estimated revenue and put in the weight. And then we basically have the information on all the same information, but presented in a Sankey table, so we can look through some of these records here, kind of get a different view on how everything is structured. So it's basically giving us the same data as we looked at the funnel chart earlier, but it's a very different visualization, a different way of working with the data and going through it. And notice here we actually can do the same kind of drill down here and say, look at the different table and kind of get a different type of visualization on how their individual opportunities are basically flowing through the whole business process. Now, of course, it's probably have your eyes here on the main visual, the Sankey visual that's changing a lot in this process. We do have some options to change the label, so we can actually put some links on there so we can see some values instead of just the labels, see some different information on there. Now, when I click these, notice the values here in this opportunity table is actually not changing. That was something I noticed when I first set this up. So it's not drilling down to only see the opportunities that's being selected, which of course can be a little annoying because that's actually a very, very nice feature. And we can actually fix that. So I'll go to the relationship button over here. And this is something that happens by default when I made this connection. So I wanted to highlight it because notice here, this is a Sankey table that I was using, and it's linking to the opportunity table over here. And by default, it'll create this type of relationship. Now, if I just double-click on this relationship, we can see here there's a cross-filter direction being used. And by default in this situation, it'll be a single direction is single, but we can actually change this to both. I'll go ahead and say OK. And I can come back to the visuals. And now we can actually see that the information there on the opportunity table is being drilled down as well. So we can make sure that everything is being included in the drill down feature here. So if you're cross-filtering that's not working in the manner you should expect, and you're just using regular data, you're not using a lot of measures, for example, just check the filter direction there, the cross-filter direction, and make sure that's both. Then you can probably alleviate a lot of those issues. All right, so that was the Sankey chart. So that was two different approaches. We are actually here between this chart and this chart. We are looking at the very same data, the same drop-off rates, everything. Two very different ways of visualizing it, and two different approaches on getting to that same result. But I wanted to show both of those options here and see what you can actually work with in Power BI. All right, Adam, do we have any questions at this time?
Let's see if we can get any questions. Okay. Someone's asking, which of these two techniques were you able to develop quicker?
So, good question. So between using M and DAX, there's a lot of overlap in the feature set and what they can do. And I think the answer to which one you should pick is usually which one is easier for you to work with. I would say in this case, the version with M actually came about a lot quicker because I could basically just, quickly create those tables and then easily put them on top of each other. And then I basically had all the details that I needed, whereas with the DAX version, I had to create a lot more measures because I needed all the individual stages and statuses and put those together into those formulas that I could then use in the funnel chart. That also means I could create some specific, the specific drop-off rates and basically have more pieces to work with afterwards. So that gave me some more flexibility in some other areas. But for these examples, the M version was actually much faster. So yeah, if you're looking for some guidance, whichever one gets the job done faster. If you're working, depending on your data set, I would say if you're working with less than 1 million records, you're probably not going to see much performance improvement going one way or the other. They're going to be pretty similar.
Or would you mind putting your contact info up on the screen just in case people want to email you a question offline, just so they have it? Great. And once again, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to submit them at the Q&A box on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll just give people another minute or so to kind of collect their thoughts.
Yeah, and we had, I'm just going to put my the slide up there. So, I mean, you can definitely find me on Twitter at CMShotGuy. You can contact me there. Or it's probably easier, just send me an email, ulrich@elevatesolutions.com. So we did have, I was just going to leave this on for a few seconds there. So we did have a question on using fetch XML with CRM data as opposed to using the standard query. And let me actually just take this one down, and we'll go back to the query editor. Because what you can do with the fetch XML, and I don't have a complete example here because I didn't prep it, but I'll try and talk to it. So if we look at the advanced editor, so I actually took a shortcut here when I was working with this data. There's a Power BI accelerator available from Sonoma Partners. So if you search for that Power BI accelerator from Sonoma Partners, it'll actually create a fetch for you, basically an M code which uses fetch XML in the query. It does make it a little difficult to decode when you're looking at it here because it's a looping M. So it's very advanced, it's very easy, and it adds a lot of the owner. It can add all of the option set labels instead of just working with the option set codes that says 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. It'll actually put in all those names automatically. So you can very, very easily get like a full model using this. But it's basically using the fetch collection. So if you look at here, it's basically using the fetch. So you can set that up. I'm actually planning on writing a blog post that will specify this in a little more detail on how you can use the fetch and copy a fetch XML and put it into your M code here, because if you want to use that instead. So there are some benefits to using fetch or data instead of the standard connection. Like if you have a lot of data and you only want a subset of your data, for example, so let's say you have 10 years of data in your system, but you only want to collect data from last year. You can actually use the fetch, or you could also filter using OData, but you could actually filter the data with the fetch prior to retrieving it, unlike the standard Power BI connection to Dynamics 365, which would basically collect all the data, all 10 years of data, instead of just the 1 year that you are actually interested in. So there's some options there. So that's why a fetch could be relevant to use instead. And of course, with the Power BI accelerator there, you can save a lot of time if you need to like quickly mock up a demo and switch out all the option set labels. So that's a great tool. I definitely recommend trying it out.
So we do have a couple more questions. So someone's asking, what is the size of databases where you can use Power BI instead of Tableau?
Let's go. So there's a very, very high upper limit on Power BI. So the free version caps your data size at 1 gigabyte for the government version. The Pro version caps you at 10 gigs. And off the top of my head, I don't remember where Power BI Premium caps out, but we're talking terabytes, many terabytes. We're not talking petabytes yet, but we're in the terabytes item. So size-wise, data size-wise, I don't believe there's any reason to, Tableau doesn't really have anything on Power BI there.
Someone is actually asking if Elevate offers Power BI training.
So, good question. We don't have any trainings canceled. It kind of varies on what we're training on a little bit. I do, not for Elevate Solutions, but I actually do a Power BI and Business Intelligence class for Microsoft specifically. It's called Business Intelligence using Power BI and Azure in Microsoft Dynamics 365 Customer Engagement. I'm also doing that class at the Extreme CRM conference that's coming up here in a couple of months. It's a full-day class where we're talking about all the options on working with Power BI, using Power BI, and all the other tools that you also can do business intelligence with, like customer insights, using Power BI with Azure SQL replication, for example, and get a comprehensive view of what your BI features are when working with the 365 customer engagement platform.
Okay, let's see if we have any more questions.
I'm going to also do a quick plug for the CRM UG coming up here in a couple of weeks, beginning of October in Nashville. There's some good Power BI classes there too.
Perfect. Yeah, and somebody else actually was just asking if there's any training available to learn what you just demonstrated. So you pretty much answered that one. Let's see if we have any other. So someone says, continuing on one of the previous questions, in posting to log entity in CRM, they want to know if they can show this. How do they do that so they can show the state daily, weekly, monthly, etc.?
So they wanna break it down by like what day the actual stage change happened.
Well,
Is that it?
Yeah. Let me read the previous question that he actually asked. I just found that. So this person's asking, are there any new options such as common data model or other techniques for capturing and reporting trends as snapshots in time? I use CRM goals for capturing that and then representing and posting to the log entity in CRM so they can show the state daily, weekly, monthly.
Okay. I mean, that would still be the approach, that you do need an additional entity to capture the data on a given day. So that would be the approach, and then of course you can visualize that within Power BI. But you do need it in your database. Power BI would not be able, at least, because it's basically just pulling the data from Dynamics. So whenever your data changes, it would change in your Power BI data model too. It wouldn't keep the previous state of what an opportunity was in, unless it's recorded in the actual database. Now, and that's actually a good question. And that's usually the next step of working with the data. That was something I intentionally left out because I wanted to say we have this standard opportunity model, the standard opportunity data, and see, how much can we actually push on getting some of these insights without, creating extra entities in CRM to collect some of these data. But as mentioned, that would be the next step. CDS, the Common Data Services, are still fairly new, so I can't really speak to whether or not there's anything coming there that would complement it or be a better option at this time. But it's definitely something I'll be sure to blog about if that happens.
See if we have any more questions. Someone's asking if you have any tips on creating relationships within your data. This person has never been able to successfully make one, so they're looking for tips.
So I can actually show a quick one here. Two options. So this one was actually created automatically, and the reason, the one that's highlighted here, and I'm deleting it right now, the opportunity to opportunity. The reason that one was created automatically is because opportunity and opportunity here has the exact same name. So if you have those IDs, for example, your owner ID field on contact links to the system user ID on the system user table. That will never automatically be put together because they have different names unless you take your owner ID and rename it to system user ID. Then it automatically creates that relationship. But otherwise, in this case where I have these two items up, I can basically grab the opportunity and drag it over to the field that I want to create the relationship on. And Power BI will figure out itself if this is a one-to-many, one way or the other. And notice here the automatically created relationship is single direction. So that's where I would come in and basically just make sure for this case is that we can cross-filter both ways. So if you have a lot of fields, you can always come up here in the manage relationships and then you get some additional dialogues and you can search through the different fields. But if you have a reasonable amount of fields here on the visual relationship diagram, it's pretty easy to like just drag and drop those fields on top of each other.
Yeah, let's see if we have any more questions. We'll just take a couple of more if anybody has any questions. We'll just give you another few seconds to collect your thoughts.
All right, and as people are doing that, I will do my best to get a blog post out about using Fetch XML in Power BI and kind of describe that in a little more detail. I didn't have a good example here where you could see exactly what was happening. I did reference the Power BI Accelerator tool. That's worth giving a look. It's a great tool. But I wanted to give some additional detail on what's actually going on when it's pulling the data with the fetch.
Perfect. All right. Well, it doesn't look like we have any more questions, so why don't we end there? Ulrich, I'd like to thank you so much for presenting today, and I'd like to thank everybody for attending, taking the time out of their day to join us. We recorded the session, and we'll actually send out a link to everyone in case you want to view it again. And if you want to speak with Ulrich offline, Ulrich, I think, did you show people your contact info already? I think you did, right?
I did.
People should have it. Okay.
So, otherwise there it is.
There you go. Okay. Perfect. Great. Well, thanks so much.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thanks for all the questions.
Thanks. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Bye-bye.